Hello there, I'm James. Thank you for joining me for this live stream. If you're watching this as a recording, probably best to skip forward a minute or so because I'm going to sit down, relax, and just sort of ramble for a minute while we wait for people to join. So, thank you. Yeah, where to begin really? I guess, welcome into my garden. I'm based in East Oxford, so just off of the Iffley Road, and I work for a wildlife project based here in the city but running UK wide, and we're called Naturehood, and we run through a conservation NGO called Earthwatch Europe. And yes, my name's James. Not sure if I said that or not. A little bit nervous. I guess you're gonna have to bear with me on that. And as I mentioned, just gonna sit tight for 30 seconds or more, or a minute more, and just wait for people to start to arrive in this live stream. Yes. Okay, brilliant. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself a fair few times as we get going, just because I'm aware that people will be joining all the way through these next few minutes. And so, to reiterate, I'm James. This is my small urban garden based just off the Iffley Road in East Oxford. And what I'm aiming to do with this live stream is to just welcome you in, walk you around. Don't worry, it's not just going to be me sitting here. I'm going to walk you around and show you all the things that I'm trying to do in this garden to make it a bit more wildlife friendly. And one of the challenges that I have in doing that is that this is it's only a small garden, as I mentioned, and it's also a rented property. So I don't want to make any really big or drastic changes without getting the consent of my landowner, well, landlord in this case. But that doesn't mean I can't still do things that are supporting wildlife, and I'll be talking to you about those as we walk around, but just going to wait for a moment longer. And as we do, actually, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Naturehood and what we are and what we're doing, and forgive me if you're already well clued in, but basically we are a community wildlife project, and as I mentioned, we're running in Oxford and Swindon, but we do have participants spread right across the UK. And what we do is we really do our best to support people to take action for wildlife. And the idea of that is that if lots of individuals take action, then those smaller impacts add up, and we actually get a meaningful change for species like hedgehogs and butterflies, birds and frogs, lots of different things that people really care about, but it's hard to completely transform a landscape just on your own. And that's why supporting people to take action for wildlife is really important for us, and that's some of the things I'm going to be talking about. But there's also an aspect of this which is about research and science. And so when we ask people to sign up to our project on our website, naturehood.uk, we ask people about what their garden's like and what are the things they're doing in it, as well as kind of prompting people to take regular wildlife surveys in their space. And what's really important about that is that we want to find out how UK gardens support biodiversity and what biodiversity actually is present. And there might be a few surprises in that, but we can't send ecologists into everyone's gardens. You can imagine the kind of logistical and administrative nightmare, regardless of the current conditions around social distancing. And so everyone needs to be their own ecologist in a way if we're going to be able to find those things out. And that's what we try and support and encourage people to do. And the information that you provide goes back into that research project, and we can hopefully find out some really important things. And yeah, we've been running for a bit over a year, and I think that's probably a long enough wait. So I'm going to do one last intro, and then I'm going to start walking you around. So yes, welcome to my garden in East Oxford. I'm James, and yeah, we're just off the Iffley Road. It's a small urban garden on a rented property, so please don't expect the world of me. And my plan is to just walk you around the area and show you all the different things that I'm doing to support wildlife here. So let's get going, shall we? Oh. Selfie stick this summer. I guess this is not how they're exactly designed, but I'm okay with that. So yes, the first thing we have as we walk around is just here. And it's actually this bed that looks very unattractive at the moment. And the reason for that is that 2 weekends ago, myself and my housemates dug over this whole area, pulling up some of the unwanted plants that were there and turned it all over, ready to plant a load of wildflower seeds. And actually, we've bought some plants to go in there as well. So these are some lavender plants that we picked up a few weeks ago, and they're just sitting in their pots for now, but they're going to be going in here to help support the bees and the butterflies that we have that come and visit the garden every now and then. We've also planted some dandelion, and we've got some more wildflower seed that we're going to plant up in there over the Easter weekend, which should be quite exciting. So I'm hoping that I'll have a subsequent video to this where I'll say, oh, do you remember that really ugly looking bed that was just bare dirt? There's now all these different wildflowers there, isn't that exciting? But let's not, let's not get ahead of ourselves, touch wood and all of that. Next to this wildflower bed also, in a little bit in advance of the flowers, there's this wonderful little bug house, and you can see the little ladybirds on it as well, so that all the bugs know it's a bug house. Yeah, I know. It's quite cute. And the idea of these sorts of places is that for species of bugs that do live in things like hollow stems, so if you imagine reeds and grasses that dry out and die, and then the stems are left for a year, those sort of temporary habitats are where a lot of species of things like bees, not the actual honeybees, but other more, less supported species of bee will make their nests. And what's really important there is that it's not too big an area, and that I will replace it before too long as well, because I don't want it to become a hotbed for disease and having things like fungus and parasites that stay there year on year and infect and predate upon new bee families or new ladybird families or whatever we end up having in there. And that also means that I get to build a new one, because this one was a wonderful Christmas present from my mum, but I did want to build my own, so I've only got to wait a couple of years before I'm ready to do that. Okay, let's walk around. There's some fairy lights that sort of catch me every time I'm in here, so apologies for when that happens inevitably. We've actually got some more bare beds here at the moment. So if you can see with the two borders, and the plan is for this is to turn it into more of a vegetable patch. And I know that some of you will be thinking, well, you don't really want wildlife in your vegetable patch, thinking of the slugs and the snails and all those sorts of things. But actually, what I've got in the moment is radishes and carrots, going to have some runner beans too in some of the worst quality soil. And my plan for managing snails and slugs is to really actively encourage hedgehogs and frogs, because those are natural predators for those sorts of creatures that I don't want in those beds. And hopefully they'll be able to keep the numbers down. And if I need to, there's other things I can do. So I know that using copper planting tools can be really effective, because copper has a chemical reaction with the bodies of slugs and snails that repels them from an area. And there's also companion planting, which we have some information about on our website, but I don't know enough about to talk about it off the top of my head. Yes, and one of the reasons that I'm going to be putting in runner beans along the border is because that's some really, really quite awful quality soil. It's very stony and sandy, and in that area I want to be building up the amount of nutrients in it, because I want to be using it for vegetables. With the part that I talked about putting wildflowers in by the bug house, the aim there is to leave it as quite low quality soil, because for a lot of species of wildflower, actually most of the time they prefer those sort of less rich compost conditions, more kind of imperfect areas, because that's where they've kind of thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. And so when people plant wildflowers and they don't grow, a lot of the time it's because of the fact that you're giving them too many nutrients and too good a quality of soil. And it's a good excuse for me to do a bit less garden work and just throw in some seed and see what happens. Okay, next thing to show you all. So continuing along this border, so I've got my wildflower area up there, then this lovely veg patch in progress, I think I'll call it. And then just here, and I'm not sure how good an angle you can get, and this is where the selfie stick comes into its own, because I can kind of get you right up in there. If you can see, under this area, there's a gap that I've dug below the fence. And now, the reason for doing that is because for species like frogs and hedgehogs, which I mentioned wanting to get in the garden so they can be natural predators for some of the mini beasts that I'd rather not have, they're not capable of climbing over fences or over walls, and so I need to have the spaces for them to get through and under. And what you can do is drill or cut a hole in a wall or a fence, but because, as I mentioned, this is a rented property, that's not an option that's available to me. So I've dug this gap under, and that means that if my landlord does kick up a fuss, which I've spoken to him about it since doing it, probably not the right order to do it, not what I'd recommend, and he seems pretty fine about it. But if he would like to, he can just refill that hole. And if there's any issues with future tenants, again, they can refill it. So there are ways to think around these challenges. And actually, it only took 2 days to have this passageway dug in before there was a frog found in my garden for the very first time. And it was a very exciting Sunday evening in November last year. And at the moment, frogs will be traveling around a lot because they're in their breeding season, and you should be seeing some frog spawn and that sort of thing around if you're lucky. Okay, let's move on to my next bit. And this is the nasty corner of my garden. Well, maybe visually nasty, but we'll see. So these are what I would describe as my landlord's lovely gifts to us that he just doesn't want. So you can see a load of bricks, which actually make quite a good rockery. This piece of plastic guttering pipe, which I'm determined to find a use for as a wildlife passageway. Wheelbarrow, empty gas canister, empty buckets, these sorts of things. But then also this compost bin. Now, what I've been doing with this compost bin is that it's kind of been abandoned for a year. And so it's got a load of fresh stuff in on the top. And you can kind of see that's a lot of just garden waste on that very top layer. But mixed in with that kind of green waste is a load of stuff from the kitchen. So food waste bags that are biodegradable. And I mean, I think you probably saw some of the flies coming out. There is life now returning to that. And actually, one of the really exciting things that I've seen in this garden is that this open front of the compost that you can see there, because that's open, it means it's accessible to wildlife. So things like frogs and hedgehogs, but also mice. And one of the most exciting things I've ever seen in my garden, which was a fox scrabbling away at that opening, obviously hunting for things that it thinks might well be in that space, which I thought was very exciting and quite a reassuring. If a fox thinks they can go in there, then there's a good chance they can. Yeah, brilliant. Just a quick note for everyone that because I'm not entirely technically able, I'm doing all right, I hope. And my selfie stick is helping a lot. Very proud of that. I won't be able to be reading your comments as they're coming in, but feel free to post them as the video goes on, and then I'll definitely come back and address them after the video is finished, and I'll let you know answers to any questions. And what I'd really love is comments and suggestions you have for this space and new things that I should be doing, or new ways that I can be, you know, growing veg effectively, planting more wildflowers, all these sorts of things. Okay, what else did I want to talk to you about? I know. Trees. I've actually got loads of trees in this space, which is quite wonderful, and they're all of quite a different ages. And this, well, the tree that I love but also hate because it's below my head height and right in the middle of the garden, this tree just here is actually a crabapple tree. And what that means is that for a good chunk of the year we have things like greenfinches and blue tits, blackbirds and squirrels that come and they feed off the crab apples on that tree. And so when I talk about feeding the birds in my garden, I never actually buy bird feed, but I make sure that the crab apple tree is healthy and producing fruit. And there's actually something I was going to show you as well in that. So there's this apple here that's been in our kitchen for almost 2 months now. The joys of a shared house, I know. And so what I've done this morning is I've just cut it in half, as you can see. And as this is the wrong time of year to have apples on this tree, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick it on. That's really not worked, but oh, go on. No, tree's falling apart. This is why you don't do things live. Anyway, I've got those. I'll just nest it in there. And yeah, so I've done this a couple of times over the last few weeks because it was a full pack of apples that's been abandoned. And what I've seen is, even though it's not the time of year where you'd naturally expect there to be apples on the trees, there's a lot of birds that are starting to nest, and so really feeding a lot. And so I've had a pair of blackbirds that have been coming every single day to this garden, either digging for worms, like doing a little patting feet dance to try and get them to the surface. They've been feeding on these apples, and there was actually 2 days ago, one of the apples been about half eaten, and then I was sitting just about a meter away from it, and a grey squirrel ran down a fence, grabbed it in its teeth, and ran off again, raced off, and started eating it on the fence at the back of the garden, which was quite exciting. So yeah, you can be quite innovative with the ways that you support wildlife in the garden, and I hope I've given you a few examples of that. And fruiting trees is actually one of my favourite ways, even though it's quite straightforward and it's not the most glamorous. It's still something, and obviously planting trees anyway is an amazing thing to be doing to combat other environmental crises that are going on. So I think that's something I'd certainly encourage. And then I'll certainly update you with my wildflower seeds and that wildflower patch if it grows anything. Similarly with my vegetables, please. And yeah, I hope that this has been really helpful. So just to wrap things up, I wanted to go on another short monologue. Actually, this whole thing feels like a monologue, so apologies again for not being able to read your comments as it goes on, but don't worry, I'll definitely get back to them. And that's just talking again about Naturehood. And so I'm not sure if you managed to catch this at the beginning, but I wanted to reiterate that we're a locally based wildlife project. I'm here in East Oxford, just off the Iffley Road, but we have participants from right across the UK and even a couple from outside the UK. And what we're all about is supporting people to take action for wildlife, and doing that through lots of resources and information, going down to sort of what's the best species of flower to be planting for pollinators at this time of year, and how big should my wildlife passageway be, or I want to dig a pond, you know, these sorts of things. That there's lots of guidance and support for that. And it's also a case of we'll be sending out regular newsletters as we do, and updates with ideas. And there's also this underlying research project to that. So we ask people to tell us what their gardens are like and what they're doing in them to support wildlife. And that tells us some really useful information, because it's really difficult to gather data on garden biodiversity when you're an ecologist that can't get into people's gardens. I mean, what would you suggest you do? You sort of do your best to peer over the fence, and that's still a little bit dodgy, particularly now when we're all socially isolating. So we ask people instead to be their own ecologists, to go out in their own garden and do these short and quite fun biodiversity surveys to find out what species they have. And maybe even it's just a case of doing our signing up and completing your nature space by doing, I don't know, maybe it's 5 questions of, do you have some lawn or some patio, those sorts of things, which actually it's really valuable information to gather, because it's very hard to do it any other way. And yes, if you do want to do all of that, naturehood.uk is the website. I'll make sure that's quite prominent. And also follow this group. It's our Florence Park Naturehood that I'm going live from right now, but we also have a Marston-based one, a Birmingham-based one, a couple in Swindon as well. So just Google Naturehood, and I'm pretty sure you'll find something that's of interest for you. And yeah, I hope you really enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays. Thank you everyone for joining me on this live stream. And yes, brilliant. Gonna end there. Thank you.